Hello friends, and welcome to my third installment of the What's My Type series. In this series we are going to cover 6 character archetypes popular in plays, musicals, and operas. The ingenue, the leading man, the broad, the villain, the leading lady, and the funny man / funny woman. Without further ado, let's begin. So today we're going to be discussing broads. I will be giving examples of broads in musicals, operas, and plays. And then I will discuss how to find out if you might be a broad. So first things first, what is a broad? As with the leading man, I was actually unable to find a singular definition of what a broad is, so I decided to kind of come up with my own definition, just like with the leading man. The broad, simply put, is a character role. She can sometimes be the funny woman of the show, she tends to be an alto in musicals and in operas, and is the opposite of an ingenue. Whereas the ingenue is typically young and soft and naive, the broad tends to be cast a little older, she's typically much bolder, and she's a little more experienced in the ways of the world. So let's dig into some examples. Musicals. The broad is a popular stereotype in both classical and contemporary musical theater. Many times the leading lady is actually combined with the broad. As with any other type, there are also subtypes of the broad. The typical musical theater broad is typically an alto, she is a little older, and she's usually either humorous or very eccentric. For my first example, I'm actually going to use an actress who to me really defined what the broad was. And that is Ethel Merman. Most of her roles on her resume are broads. And the one that just stands out to me right now is Mama Rose from the musical Gypsy. Mama Rose, in my opinion, is an excellent example of a classic broad who actually isn't that comedic. She's much more of a serious character. A lot of people tend to think that broads in musical theater are only comedic, but there's quite a number of serious broads. She is so complicated as a character. I'm not sure if I could call her the villain of the show because there's just a million things going on with her. Some other examples of a musical theater broad include the eccentric, resourceful Mrs. Lovett from Sweeney Todd. Amazing role. She seems like so much fun to do. I would love to do her when I'm older. A character that, in my opinion, crosses the boundaries between broad and leading lady is Carlotta from Phantom of the Opera. While she's not an alto, nor is she a belter. To hit those crazy high notes, you have to be classically trained. She is very bold, she's brash, she's loud, she's out there. And those are definitely personality traits of a broad. So she's an excellent example of a broad who's not necessarily a typical broad. Opera. The opera broad is similar to the musical theater broad in terms of personality. They oftentimes are quite comedic and brash and bold. However, in opera, the vocal range is a little murkier of who is a broad and who's not. And there are ingenues, typically soubrettes, who have broad-like tendencies. I remember I spoke of Adele from Die Fledermaus in my ingenue video, and I categorized her as a comedic ingenue, but she does have some broad-like tendencies. She's a little flashy, she's a little out there, she's not your typical ingenue. Of course you have your typical broads such as Mrs. Peachum from the Threepenny Opera, and yes, I am using the Threepenny Opera as an example in the opera category today. Though she is not a contralto, she definitely is bold, brash, and her drunk antics serve as comedic relief in the show. You have stock-made characters. Giovanna from Rigoletto is an excellent example of a broad. She's very funny, she can be played by a contralto. Plays. As with the other two types, broads in plays are so much harder to define than in musical theater and in opera. You don't necessarily have to stick to voice type. However, I think one of the best and most classic examples of a broad in a play is the nurse in William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Again, she is a stock nursemaid type of character that translates really well into opera. She definitely serves as a comedic relief in the show. She's eccentric, and she can definitely be considered a character role. A lot of character actresses play the nurse at one point in their life. Of course, not all broads are comedic relief roles. Sometimes they can be villains too. The Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, and yes, there is a play version of this show, is a broad, Loud, not a typical beauty, and very eccentric, and she's also the villain of the story. Broads often fall into more than just one type. There are broads who are leads, there are broads who are the funny women, and there are broads who are villains. And there are even broads with ingenue and leading lady tendencies, which makes this type so difficult to define. Now that I've given some examples, you might be thinking, well, how do I know if I'm a broad? A lot of actors, as with the leading men, grow into the broad type. Many broads are written as older women as opposed to younger, so that absolutely plays a huge part in casting a broad. However, many women that I know who play broads now started off in character comedic relief roles. So if you play that right now, you might be going into the broad type later. Think about your voice type. Do you have the sound that a broad does? That big Ethel Merman belty sound? Can you sing low notes with ease? What type of energy do you bring into the room? What type of look do you have? Are you a little more eccentric or are you a little more reserved? These are definitely questions you want to ask yourself when you're thinking, am I broad or not? However, as I've said before, a type does not define you. If you can sing both Mama Rose and Anna from The King and I, then go for it. I recently went to an audition and made it all the way to final callbacks for a character who is definitely not my type, but I had such a blast doing it, and I am in the show now. I will reveal that in just a few moments. So don't sell yourself short. You can play anything you want as long as it's realistic and within reason. And that is it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It takes 2 seconds and it is free. You can find me on Instagram at pollypeachums with 2 U's. Join me next time for a very important video about why accepting ensemble is always a good idea. I'm going to reveal a show I was cast in now. I'm super excited. I was cast in Cabaret. I am in the dance ensemble and I am one of the Kit Kat performers. That is so much fun. I cannot wait to go on this amazing journey. My first rehearsal is Wednesday and I will definitely be documenting the process. Thank you so much and I will see you guys all next week. You guys have a great week and stay hydrated.